Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the King's English Bookshop. My name is Rob, and on behalf of the booksellers that I enjoy working with, we welcome you to our store. I would like to introduce to you the man who will introduce our author, and that Mike Ramsdale.
People have asked me from time to time, how is it that I ever got working in the spy world? And it was because of my dad and my brothers. My dad is the greatest patriot I've ever known. But during my time as a covert agent in Nizhny Novgorod in Gorky, we came upon this young, handsome American student, Val Karren. And we're thrilled that Val has put down in print in his Deceit of Riches his experiences while he was there. And I know you're going to enjoy Val's presentation, and we wish him all the best.
I'm very happy to see you all here, and it's very nice that I know 99% of you. As Mike mentioned, we met in Nizhny Novgorod in 1995, and that's where the book starts. But it's based a lot in what I experienced living there as a student. The question that always comes up is, why on earth would you go voluntarily to Russia? Those of you who are under the age of 45 would probably not remember a movie that came out in 1983. It's a TV movie on a Sunday night from ABC. It was called The Day After. Does anybody remember that show? Did it have an impact on anybody? Yeah? I was 10 years old when that came out. I probably should have been in bed, but I watched it with the family. And this movie was a dramatization of a nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the United States. And it scared me to my core. And I'd have nightmares about it for months and years afterwards. And in my bedroom, I had a wooden windowsill. And late at night when I'd hear the jets take off, at 10, 11, 12 years old, I was convinced that we were just about to get nuked. And I remember putting my teeth in that windowsill, waiting, watching. And after 30, 40 minutes, well, I knew it didn't happen, so I went back to sleep. And so that's what drew me to understand and get involved with everything Russian and Soviet at the time. Maybe not when I was 10 or 12, but 14, 15, 16, I became very involved with politics, current affairs, international relations. But that was, for me, an extremely compelling problem in the world, was the risk of nuclear war. It drew me to things that were the relations between the United States and the Soviet Union. In 1987, of course, Ronald Reagan, Mikhail Gorbachev signed a very important nuclear treaty, which started to reduce the number of nuclear weapons that each held. And for me, that was a wonderful thing. And I remember when they signed the treaty, how relieved I felt. And so I was a big fan of Mikhail Gorbachev through the late 80s, early 90s, because of the fact that he was helping to bring that threat to an end. So when I started school at BYU in the summer of 91, I had a Soviet flag above my bed. Now, you can imagine at the BYU having a Soviet flag above your bed caused some eyebrows to raise. But for me, it was really just a show of support for the changes that were going on, that were getting rid of that threat that had really frightened me as a kid. Then in August of 91, of course, after that first term at the school, there was a coup d'etat in Moscow. I don't know if you remember that. August 91, Mikhail Gorbachev is pretty much deposed by his Central Committee, and he's put under house arrest in the Crimea, and the tanks were in Moscow, and the tanks had surrounded Kiev, and they were trying to push it backwards again. And I remember watching Boris Yeltsin talk down the whole Red Army and the KGB, fully expecting him to be assassinated. That didn't happen, of course. And in January '92, I met him in London, shook his hand, as he was on his way to the United Nations General Assembly at the beginning of that year. So for me, that was such an honor to get to meet him and shake his hand. And I spoke a little bit of Russian at the time, so I said, "Good luck, happy you're alive. How do you do? My name is." At the time, that was probably the biggest event of my life, was to meet Boris Yeltsin. 9 months later, though, I found myself in Kiev as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which continues this step forward in my progression to writing this book. You see some folks there that I met that are dear friends, and you got to put yourself maybe in my shoes 25 years ago, having grown up in the late 80s in the Cold War. And 9 months earlier, these people were Soviets. They were the evil communists. But I can guarantee you they are family-loving, patriotic, generous, warm people with a spiritual mindset. Immediately following that, I spent time in Russia itself, working as a tour guide on the Volga River. And getting to see all the little nooks and hidden corners of Russia. In 1994, things were changing dramatically and extremely. Here on the left, it's a statue of Vladimir Lenin with his arm cut off, and usually you see him pointing the way to the great bright future. This was in a little village on the Volga, where you wouldn't think political activists would do that, but he, and then on the right, the churches are being restored, so a great influx of feeling of expression, and it was just intoxicating to see those changes and to see freedoms come out, see people being able to express themselves without going to the Gulag, being sent to Siberia, and feel that excitement and that hope in their communities. And from these pictures, you got me there between a number of the soldiers there running drills in the town of Yaroslavl. They have a good sense of humor, a good sense of irony. They're really fun to talk to. And they proposed this picture, not me. It's a really fun spirit there that is not as cold-faced and as serious as maybe the movies or the media wants to portray Russians to be. And so that was, for me, it continued to build that relationship with the people there, and the youth and the hope that was in them, and the picture on the right, the fun, just the zest for life that surprised me. So immediately following the cruise year, I went to study in Nizhny Novgorod, and this is where Mike and I met. Mike and Bonnie. Bonnie's not there. There she is. But I went for very down, close to the ground experience there. I didn't live at the student dorms. I wound up sharing an apartment with these two ladies, a mother and a niece. And learned so much there about their culture, living in the communal apartment with them. As I mentioned, in these years, these formative years of my experience in the former Soviet Union, I recognize that I was a very naive person about it all. As I look back now, the feelings I had of, hey, Russia's open now, and they're going to go to democracy, and they're going to be free, they're going to have all the choice and opportunities to move forward like a liberal democracy in the West. I hate to say it, but this time that I spent as a student at Nizhny Novgorod really capped that optimism. And so much of the student academic work I was doing there at the time was also based in incredible naivete from my side. I dove right into research the corruption in the government, and you don't do that there. But as I got through a large part of the project, and I was talking with my foreign student advisor about it, she confiscated my notes and told me that I would not publish. It would be too dangerous for the university. It is part of the book, indeed. It's part of the story. And if I did publish that in the journal I was being encouraged to publish it in by my dean, who was a political animal, it would bring the university and myself and the other foreign students into grave danger. When my research notes were confiscated, and a good friend of mine said, "Time for you to leave Russia," I left. And I left without sitting for my final exams that year. And part of the reason I wanted to write this book in the end is a lot of that research goes into this book. There is a little philosophy in the book as well, and that comes mostly in the title, The Deceit of Riches. As I went to Russia with the naivety that things were opening up, things would be great, democracy would be there, freedoms would come, I quickly learned a different lesson. Just because you are economically well off does not mean you are free. And I saw this a lot in how the people there were looking for the quick rich scheme. Now that you could own a business or run a business and make profits and have a bank account for yourself, all great things, but they thought that was personal freedom. But what happens is everybody starts competing for the oil reserves, for the aluminum plants in Siberia, for the banking system, those that were pursuing the big payoff, the get-rich-quick scheme, they just wound up dead. To understand what happened in the early 1990s with the corruption and how that's been legitimized has led to, I guess, what I would call a kleptocracy, where the thieves are in charge. And it's not an honest system. You can't get ahead without being dishonest. Now, I'm sure there are exceptions to it. But in general, the system is rigged for those that grab the spoils when they could. An example I'll give is in the mafia wars for the aluminum factories in Siberia. Everybody, when the factories were privatized, from the government owning them to being private, everybody in the work line got shares. What the mafia come in and do, they went and shot the director and said, "Give us all your shares and we shoot you and your families too." And so they said, "Here, take the shares." And so they were swindled out of what is a billion-dollar industry of aluminum production. And now the super rich walk away with the spoils and now letting the industry fall apart, and they lose their jobs. Like I said, I was disappointed after my study there and my research that it was not going to open up and be a free society. It was going to still be this, just by a different class and under a different ideology. So it had been on my mind for some time due to the changes in the relationship between the countries. For years, nobody cared anymore about Russia. It's off the map, off the chart. But then with the solidification of Putin's power there, and started getting more and more criticism in the press, and the tensions rising between the countries again, it was, hey, the time's now. And if I'm going to do it, I better do it. The inspiration of the spy work came from having met Mike. Now, I didn't know at the time that Mike was doing what he was there doing. I understood him to be a businessman, and I really wanted to be doing what he was doing. So the plot did not even come together until after Mike's book, The Train to Putyevka, came out. When I said, "Oh, look at that."
Surprise, surprise.
And so I immediately started thinking, well, what was he doing there? And asking those questions, what was he doing there? What could he have been doing there? What did he do there? I started to speculate. And so the character in the book who is inspired by Mr. Ramsdale is not what he did. It is simply the question of what would a spy have been doing there? Yes, I have started a second book. It is a sequel to this one. It is not a rerun. So there are the two main characters, Del and Peter, do continue on. There are twists and turns again, but there is a new young lady introduced who goes through a very interesting evolution from being complicit to trying to fix the situation. And it is based in Romania and Ukraine. Yeah, it brings in a heroine at this point. So yeah, thank you.